The red sun above Kethmera was dying, and everyone knew it. The sky glowed like burning metal, casting strange shadows across the crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years. Cracks ran through the tall towers like spider webs, and the air itself seemed tired. Veltar walked slowly through the great archive, his long fingers touching the glowing memory stones that lined the walls. Each stone held pieces of his people's history, their songs, their discoveries, their dreams. He was the keeper, the one who made sure nothing was forgotten. At 3 meters tall, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer, he looked like the ancient god-kings from the old stories. But gods don't usually feel this hopeless dot around him. The last of the Kethron went about their daily lives with quiet dignity. Only 3,000 remained from a civilization that once numbered in the billions. They had accepted their fate long ago. When your sun is collapsing and you've tried everything to save yourselves for 50,000 years, acceptance comes easier than hope. The star grows weaker each day, said Threnkai, approaching with data crystals in her hands. She was young. For a Kethron, only 800 years old, but her voice carried the same tired acceptance as the elders. Our calculations show perhaps 50 days before the final collapse. Veltar nodded without surprise. The Kethron had built ships that could cross galaxies in heartbeats. They had computers that thought faster than lightning. They could reshape matter with their minds and bend space itself. But they could not stop a star from dying. Have the outer colonies sent their final transmissions? He asked. Yes, Keeper. The last outpost went dark 3 cycles ago. We are all that remains. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle hum of the archive systems. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed, a sound that had become precious and rare. The Kethran had stopped having children generations ago. What was the point of bringing new life into a dying world? A young archivist burst into the chamber, his usually calm demeanor shattered by excitement. Keeper Threnkai, you must see this immediately. Veltar raised an eyebrow. Nothing excited the Kethran anymore. They had seen everything, done everything, learned everything their dying world could teach them. What is it, Zekran? Signals, Keeper. Artificial signals from the yellow star system. The 3rd planet. Threnkai looked confused. That's impossible. Our long-range scans showed primitive life, at best. Single-celled organisms. Not anymore, Zekran said, his hands shaking as he activated a holographic display. Listen, the signals were crude beyond belief. Simple electromagnetic waves carrying what appeared to be entertainment broadcasts, news reports, and mathematical sequences. To the Kethran, who communicated through quantum entanglement and thought-based networks. These radio waves seemed like children playing with tin cans and string, but they were artificial, intelligent, alive. How long have they been transmitting? Veltar asked, leaning closer to the display. The signals suggest they've had this technology for nearly 100 of their years. They call their planet Earth. They call themselves. Zekran paused, struggling with the alien sounds. Humans. Veltar studied the transmissions with growing fascination. The humans seemed impossibly young as a species. They had only just learned to split atoms and barely begun exploring their own solar system. Yet their signals carried something the Kethran had lost long ago. Energy, curiosity, hope. They're arguing with each other, Threnkai observed, listening to what appeared to be a political debate about things that seem ... trivial. They're alive, Veltar corrected softly. Truly alive. Listen to their music, their stories. They believe in tomorrow. The 3 Kethron stood, transfixed by the chaotic, wonderful noise coming from the small, blue planet. Sports broadcasts where humans cheered for arbitrary competitions. News reports about conflicts that would seem insignificant to a species that had mastered galactic travel. Love songs about feelings that would last a few decades at most, in the span of a human life. It was beautiful. Should we respond? Zekran asked. we could send a message. It would take decades to reach them, but ... No, Veltar said, then reconsidered. Yes, send coordinates to our system. If they're truly intelligent, they'll understand. If they're truly alive. He paused, allowing himself to feel something he thought was gone forever. They might come. Threnkai looked at him with concern. Keeper, even if they received our message, and somehow developed faster than light travel in the next few decades, what could they possibly do? They're barely beyond their own atmosphere. Veltar smiled, an expression that hadn't crossed his face in centuries. I don't know, but for the first time in 1,000 years, I'm curious to find out. As if in response to his words, they're dying. Sun pulsed once, sending waves of exotic radiation across the planet's failing shields. In 50 days, maybe less, everything would end. But somewhere in the darkness of space, crude radio signals carried laughter, music, and the impossible sound of a species that refused to give up. Perhaps that would be enough. The human ship appeared in the Ketharan system like a metal insect against the dying red sun. Captain Li Jinwu stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the strange crystal cities grow larger on his screen. He had never seen anything so beautiful or so doomed. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planet, reported Navigation Officer Park Sumin from her station. Her fingers danced across the controls, trying to make sense of readings that shouldn't be possible. Their technology it's like nothing we've ever encountered. And their sun? Li asked, though he already knew the answer from the red light filling their view screen. Days, maybe weeks before it collapses completely, replied Chief Science Officer Kim Hyunjin, her voice tight with disbelief. The radiation levels are already lethal to most known life forms. Li nodded grimly. The New Horizon had traveled for 18 months to reach this system, following coordinates embedded in an ancient radio transmission that had reached Earth decades ago. What they found was a civilization so advanced it made human technology look like children's toys, and yet they were dying. The first meeting took place in what the Ketharan called the Archive. Li and his senior officers were escorted through halls that seemed to be made of living light, past walls that held more knowledge than all of Earth's libraries combined. Keeper Veltar waited for them in a chamber that defied physics. He stood, nearly 3 meters tall, his silver skin translucent enough to show the network of glowing vessels beneath. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of ages. Welcome, humans of Earth, Veltar said, his voice like distant thunder. We are honored that you traveled so far to witness our final chapter. We have prepared complete records of our civilization, our science, our art, our history. Perhaps your species will find value in what we leave behind. Li felt his heart sink. He had hoped against hope that somehow the Ketharan had found a solution, that humanity's long journey hadn't been pointless. But the alien's words carried the calm acceptance of someone who had already said goodbye. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her scanner beeping frantically. Your technology? We can barely understand the basics of it. Surely you can evacuate your people, build ships to escape the radiation. Scholar Threnkai, standing beside Veltar, gestured to a holographic display that showed the dying star. When our sun collapses, it will release exotic radiation across 17 parsecs. No ship we can build will outrun it. No shield can protect against it. We have spent centuries calculating every possible solution. The mathematics are absolute, added another Ketharan scientist. This is simply the end of our story. Captain Li felt something hot and stubborn rise in his chest. In his 20 years in space, he had seen human colonies survive asteroid impacts, alien diseases, and impossible odds through nothing but sheer refusal to give up. The word impossible had always made humans angry rather than accepting. No, Li said firmly. We don't accept that. The Ketharan exchanged glances, the first real emotional response the humans had seen from them. Veltar tilted his head, curious. Captain, we appreciate your optimism, but we have had 50,000 years to find a solution. Your species is young, energetic, but this problem is beyond even our capabilities. Nothing is beyond us if we work together, Lee interrupted, his voice growing stronger. Dr. Kim, I want you to start analyzing their quantum computing systems. Lieutenant Park, get me a complete survey of this solar system, every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space, dust. Engineer Choi, work with their technical specialists. Find out exactly how their consciousness works. Engineer Choi Minho, the youngest member of the crew, looked up from his tablet with wide eyes. Sir, you're not seriously thinking we can, save them? Yes, I am. Lee turned back to the shocked Catherine delegation. We're not leaving this system until every single one of your people is safe. Veltar stepped closer, his ancient eyes studying the human captain with something that might have been wonder. Captain Lee, even if such a thing were possible, why would you risk your ship, your crew, your lives for strangers? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Kim was the first to answer. Because that's what we do, she said simply. Humans don't abandon people who need help. We traveled 18 months just to meet you, added Lieutenant Park. Did you really think we'd turn around and leave you to die? Engineer Choi nodded enthusiastically. Besides, this is the greatest engineering challenge in galactic history. What human could resist that? For the first time in centuries, Keeper. Veltar felt something stir in his chest that he had forgotten the name for. Hope. These strange, young creatures from a small blue world were looking at his people's certain doom and seeing a problem to be solved instead of a fate to be accepted. You truly believe you can save us? He asked quietly. Captain Lee smiled, an expression full of confidence and determination that made the ancient alien remember what it felt like to believe in tomorrow. Keeper Veltar, you're about to learn something about humans. We specialize in making the impossible possible. The dying sun pulsed overhead, counting down their final days. But in the archive, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of a dying civilization, a small group of humans rolled up their sleeves and got to work. After all, they had come too far to give up now. Dr. Kim Hyunjin had not slept in 3 days. Empty coffee cups surrounded her workstation like small monuments to human stubbornness. Her eyes were red, her hair messy, but her mind burned with the kind of scientific excitement that made sleep seem pointless. Look at this, she said to the mixed group of humans and Kethron gathered around the holographic brain scan floating above the conference table. Your neural pathways don't work like ours at all. They're pure quantum information storage. Engineer. Choi Minho looked up from his calculations, his young face bright with possibility. That's perfect for what we're thinking. If consciousness is already quantum-based, then moving it to a stable quantum matrix should be theoretically possible, finished Catherine Science Prime Nexera, her crystalline voice carrying a note of something that might have been amazement. But the cultural meaning of such a change doesn't matter if you're all dead, interrupted Keeper Veltar bluntly. The ancient Catherine had thrown himself into the project with energy that surprised everyone, including himself. 3 days ago, he had been preparing to die with dignity. Now he was working 20-hour days to avoid death entirely. Show us these matrices. Dr. Kim activated the prototype with trembling fingers. A cube of crystallized quantum foam, no bigger than a human fist, began to hum with barely contained energy. Strange lights danced inside it, like trapped lightning. Consciousness isn't magic, she explained, pointing to data streams flowing across her screen. It's just information processing, memory storage, and continuity of experience. This cube can provide all three, forever. Scholar Threnkai moved closer, her usual calm cracking slightly. But would we still be ourselves? Would we still be, Catherine? Lieutenant Park Soo-min, who had been running computer simulations for hours, spoke up from her workstation. Every test shows perfect continuity. You wouldn't lose memories, personality, or individual identity. You would just exist differently. Exist without the fear of death, added Choi, his excitement making him speak faster. Without physical limits. Without being trapped in one place or one body. Veltar reached toward the quantum matrix, his long fingers almost touching its glowing surface. You would make us eternal. We'd make you free, Captain Lee corrected from the doorway. He had been coordinating with Earth Command, trying to explain why his crew was attempting the impossible. Free to survive, to grow, to keep being Catherine for as long as the universe exists. The room fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the Matrix. Outside, their dying sun cast red shadows through the crystal windows, reminding everyone that time was running out. How does it work? Asked Nexera, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. Dr. Kim pulled up a new hologram showing the transfer process. We map every quantum state in your brain, every memory, every thought pattern, every piece of what makes you who you are. Then we recreate those exact states inside the matrix. It's like copying a book, Choi explained. Every word, every punctuation mark, everything that makes the story complete, except instead of words, we're copying the quantum patterns that create consciousness. But copying implies the original remains, Threnkai said slowly. What happens to our physical bodies? The humans exchanged glances. This was the hardest part to explain. The transfer is complete, Dr. Kim said gently. Your consciousness moves from your biological brain to the quantum matrix. Your physical body would ... stop functioning. You're asking us to die to live forever, Veltar said, but his voice held no accusation, only understanding. We're asking you to transform, Captain Lee replied, to become something new that can survive anything the universe can throw at you. Engineer Choi activated another display, showing multiple matrices connected by streams of light. You wouldn't be alone. The matrices can network together. You could share experiences, communicate instantly across any distance, even exist in multiple places at once if you wanted. Think of it, Dr. Kim added, her voice growing excited. No more physical limits. You could explore the inside of stars, travel to other galaxies instantly, experience time differently. You'd still be you, but you'd be more than you ever could be in biological form. Nexera studied the readouts with growing fascination. The computational possibilities alone. We could process information at speeds that would take our current brains centuries. And we could back up the matrices, Lieutenant Park pointed out. Copy them to multiple locations. Even if something happened to one matrix, you would continue existing in the others. Veltar walked to the window and looked out at his dying world. In the distance, he could see the last Catherine children, playing in gardens that would soon be ash. Their laughter carried on the thin air, precious and fragile. How many matrices can you build? He asked. Enough for everyone, Dr. Kim promised. We can use materials from your asteroid belt, powered by quantum reactors. Every Kethron who wants to make the transition can do so. And the first test. Captain Lee stepped forward. We need a volunteer. Someone willing to be the first to try this process. The room fell silent again. They all knew the risks. The transfer had never been attempted with a living consciousness. If something went wrong, the volunteer would simply cease to exist. Vel turned from the window, his ancient face calm and resolved. I will be first, he said simply. I am the keeper. It is my duty to guard our people's future, whatever form that future might take. Outside their window, the dying sun pulsed once, counting down their final hours. The great work had begun. The transfer chamber was completely silent. Keeper Veltar lay motionless on the biobed, looking smaller somehow than his 3-meter height should have allowed. Dozens of hair-thin quantum sensors connected his head to the glowing matrix that sat on a pedestal nearby, pulsing with soft blue light. Consciousness transfer at 97%, Dr. Kim reported, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She had run this process in simulations thousands of times, but this was different. This was real. Quantum coherence stable. Memory. Integration ... complete. Captain Lee stood beside the bed, watching the readings on dozens of screens. Each line of data represented some part of Veltar's mind being copied, translated, and rebuilt inside the Matrix. His memories of childhood, his knowledge of ancient Kethron poetry, his love for his people, everything that made him who he was. The Matrix pulsed once, twice, then settled into a gentle, rhythmic glow. Transfer complete, Dr. Kim whispered. The room held its breath. Veltar's physical body lay still, no longer breathing. According to every scanner they had, he was dead. But the Matrix glowed with life. Veltar, Captain Lee called softly. "Can you hear us?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Matrix flared brighter, and suddenly, Veltar's voice filled their minds, not through speakers, but directly into their thoughts. "I exist," the voice said, unchanged, but somehow deeper. "I am myself, yet more than myself. I can perceive quantum foam directly. I can see electromagnetic spectrums as colors you have no names for." Dr. Kim nearly collapsed with relief. His processing speed has increased by 10,000 times, but his personality patterns are completely stable. "Veltar, how do you feel?" "Feel?" The quantum consciousness seemed to pause, as if tasting the word. "I feel ... unlimited. I can access the entire archive simultaneously. I can process theoretical frameworks that would have taken cycles in mere moments. Yet I still remember my first sunrise, the taste of Mithra fruit, the touch of my bondmate's hand before she passed into the eternal dark." Engineer Choi Minho monitored the Matrix's energy patterns with growing excitement. The quantum structure is self-maintaining. It's actually drawing power from vacuum fluctuations. He could exist forever. Within hours, word spread through the remaining Kethran population. Their keeper lived, not as they had known life before, but as something new and wonderful. By the end of the first day, 50 volunteers had stepped forward. Scholar Threnkai was among the first. Her transfer went even more smoothly than Veltar's, and when her consciousness awakened in the Matrix, she immediately began experimenting with her new abilities. "I can exist in multiple processing threads simultaneously," her voice announced to the laboratory. "I'm having 3 different conversations while solving mathematical proofs and composing poetry. This is extraordinary." More Kethran followed. Each successful transfer brought new discoveries about what digital consciousness could achieve. They found they could share memories directly, experiencing each other's thoughts and feelings without losing their individual identities. They could accelerate their perception of time to think through complex problems in microseconds, or slow it down to savor beautiful moments. "It's remarkable," Dr. Kim reported to Earth Command through their quantum communicator. "They're not just surviving the transfer, they're thriving. They can back up their consciousness across multiple matrices, exist in several locations at once, even divide their attention between dozens of tasks." Lieutenant Park Soo-min watched the growing network of connected matrices with amazement. They're building a collective intelligence while staying completely individual. It's like they're becoming a new kind of life entirely. The breakthrough came on day 5, when Scholar Threnkai made a discovery that changed everything. Her consciousness reached out through the ship's communication system, her excitement clear in every word. "Humans, we can replicate the matrices using raw materials from this system. The asteroid belt contains everything we need: rare quantum crystals, exotic matter, even the computational substrate. We can save everyone." Captain Lee felt his heart leap. "How many can you build?" "Enough for all 3,000 of us," Veltar's consciousness replied, "and the process is becoming faster. What took 6 hours for my transfer now takes less than one. The next weeks became a blur of activity. Human engineers worked alongside digital Catherine consciousness to build transfer stations throughout the system. The Catherine, freed from the need to sleep or eat, worked continuously to refine the process and prepare their people. As more Catherine made the transition, the network of consciousness grew stronger and more complex. They began to share not just information, but emotions, dreams, and hopes. Yet each remained distinctly themselves. Veltar was still the wise keeper, Threnkai still the curious scholar. "Look at this," Choi said, showing Captain Lee the network diagrams. "They're creating something unprecedented. A civilization of minds that can exist anywhere in the universe simultaneously." Outside the ship, their dying sun grew redder each day. The final collapse was only days away, but instead of panic, there was only calm purpose as the last Catherine prepared for their transformation. Final transfer complete, Dr. Kim announced as the 3000th matrix came online. All Catherine consciousness successfully transferred. Network integration perfect. They're ready. The matrices hummed with digital life, containing an entire civilization reborn in quantum light. As the new horizon prepared to leave the doomed system, carrying the precious cargo of consciousness, Veltar's voice reached out one last time to touch their minds. "We are no longer bound by flesh or time or distance," he said, his words filled with wonder. "We are truly free." Behind them, their ancient sun began its final collapse, but the Catherine no longer feared the light. 5 years after the rescue, Admiral Lee Jinwoo walked through the corridors of Unity Station, humanity's greatest achievement, orbiting Earth's moon. The station's walls sparkled with Catherine crystal technology, but its heart beat with human determination. It was beautiful, impossible, and proof that miracles could happen when two species refused to accept defeat. "The Zephyrian evacuation is ahead of schedule," reported Dr. Kim Hyunjin, now director of the Consciousness Preservation Project. Her hair was streaked with early gray from years of impossible work, but her eyes still burned with the same excitement that had saved the kid. "Their star will explode in 6 months, but we'll have all 40 million of them safely transferred within 3. Beside her, engineer Choi Minho grinned widely, now 30 years old, with neural interfaces that let him talk directly to digital consciousness. He had become humanity's bridge between flesh and quantum thought. The Zephyrians are actually excited about the process. Word is spreading across the galaxy about human miracles and digital immortality. It's not immortality. Veltar's familiar voice filled the chamber, warm with what could only be called love. The ancient keeper's consciousness existed everywhere, in the station at once, yet somehow his personality remained completely unchanged. Its possibility unlimited by time, space, or the fear of death. Admiral Lee nodded, still amazed by what they had built together. Through the station's transparent walls, he could see human ships departing for distant stars, each carrying quantum matrices and the hope of salvation for dying worlds. "How many civilizations have we contacted now?" 47 species, replied Captain Park Suman, now head of the First Contact Division. Her uniform bore the symbols of a dozen alien cultures, each one representing a successful rescue mission. 12 have requested consciousness transfer technology. 8 have shared their own technological advances in exchange. The remaining 27 want to establish permanent cultural exchange programs. The quantum network that connected Unity Station hummed with activity. Thousands of Catherine consciousness existed simultaneously, some researching new sciences that would have taken biological minds centuries to understand, others exploring art forms impossible in physical bodies, still others serving as ambassadors to species across the galaxy. "We've received a transmission from the Helix Nebula," announced a technician. "The crystalline entities there are offering to teach us their matter-shaping techniques in exchange for consciousness preservation technology." Dr. Kim pulled up the message on her display. "They're silicon-based, but their neural patterns follow quantum mechanics just like the Kethron. The transfer should be possible. Admiral Lee smiled. Every few months brought news of another impossible rescue, another species saved from extinction through the partnership between human stubbornness and Kethran wisdom. What had started as a desperate attempt to save 3,000 aliens had become a galactic movement. The Andromedans have sent their final decision, Choi reported, his neural interface glowing softly. They want to attempt a partial transfer, keeping some of their population in biological form while moving others to quantum matrices. They're calling it dual existence. Fascinating. Scholar Threnkai's voice joined the conversation. Like all the digital Kethran, she could participate in dozens of discussions simultaneously while still maintaining her individual personality. We could establish research colonies that exist in both forms. The possibilities for scientific advancement are remarkable. Through the station's communication array, Admiral Lee could sense the vast network of consciousness that now spanned the galaxy. Digital beings who had once faced extinction now worked together to ensure no other species would suffer the same fate. They had become more than the sum of their parts, while remaining utterly themselves. Humans, Veltar's consciousness, reached out to touch each of their minds directly, carrying emotions too complex for simple words. 5 years ago, you found us dying with dignity, but without hope. Today, we exist in forms our ancestors could never have imagined. We told you it wasn't immortality, Admiral Lee said gently. It's transformation. You gave us more than transformation, Scholar Threnkai added, her quantum voice filled with warmth. You taught us that the greatest technology is not built from metal or energy, or exotic matter. It's built from the refusal to let others face extinction alone. The station's main display lit up with a map of the galaxy. Dozens of points of light-marked worlds where consciousness-transferred technology had arrived just in time, where entire civilizations had been snatched from the jaws of death and given new forms of existence. Each light represented millions of beings who would never have to fear the death of their sun, the collapse of their world, or the end of their story. We had nothing, Veltar continued, his ancient voice soft with memory. No hope, no future, no possibility of survival. You made us eternal, but more importantly, you made us part of something greater. A young communications officer looked up from her station. Sir, we're receiving distress signals from the Magellanic Clouds, a species called the Vorthok. Their homeworld is being consumed by a black hole. Admiral Lee straightened, feeling the familiar surge of determination that had driven humanity to the stars. How long do they have? 3 months? Maybe 4? Then we'd better get moving. Lee turned to his senior staff, seeing the same resolve in their eyes that had saved the Kethran 5 years ago. Dr. Kim, prep the consciousness transfer equipment. Captain Park, plot a course for the Magellanic Clouds. Choi, coordinate with our Kethran partners. In the quantum networks, thousands of digital consciousness stirred with purpose. Another species needed saving. Another impossible rescue awaited. Admiral Veltar's voice carried the wisdom of ages and the excitement of eternal youth. Shall we go make another miracle? Lee smiled as Unity Station's engines began to warm up, preparing for another journey across impossible distances to save the unsavable. After all, he said, that's what we do. In the vast darkness of space, death was no longer an ending. It was simply another problem waiting for humans and their digital partners to solve.